Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Health Evolution Collective. Today, I am here with Renee, who is coming to us from the other side of the ditch, as they say, from New Zealand, who we own, of course, because we always claim our New Zealanders as Aussies, don't we?
Yes.
Especially the good ones, lol. So we'll
Yes.
claim you, Renee.
Thanks.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really honoured to be here, actually. I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts, and so, yeah, it's quite an honour that I get to feature.
Oh, well, you do have an amazing story. So I'm really excited to get that out and share that with everybody. So did you want to just start by maybe sharing a little bit about who you are, what you do, and I guess if we met at a party, how would you introduce yourself and tell us about, who you are, Renee?
Okay, well, I have been a nutritionist for about 17 years. I studied straight out of school and I went and did human nutrition and sports science. I've always loved health and, joined the gym from a young age. And so it was just a natural progression. I was into studying that. And yeah, I have 4 kids, so they've taken up quite a bit of a chunk of that time. But yeah, so I started out working in a gym as a nutritionist, and I was there for quite a long time, just sort of running a private practice, working with the personal trainers, and they would refer patients to me. Yeah, and I worked out pretty early on that certain people just could not lose weight on, the guidelines that we were taught at university. And so I did some research, and it was sort of, the internet wasn't amazing at that time. So just trying to find different ways that I could work it so that they would lose weight and get healthier. And I found that I used to do carb cycling with them. So we would drop the carbs on the non-workout days and eat slightly higher on the gym days. And it definitely had an impact. And some patients, you really had to bring the carbs down. And so I guess I kind of figured that out myself without finding any research around that. For these people to lose weight, who wanted to lose weight and get healthier, we had to drop the carbohydrates. In saying that, though, I was still doing the, eat 5-6 meals a day, and there was still, there was still like bread involved in what I was recommending to people. And it was probably about 10 years ago that I came across paleo. And so I started more implementing that into what I was doing, trying to move away from breads and grains and that kind of thing. But about 4 years ago, my husband and I decided to move to Rarotonga, which is in the Cook Islands. And we just needed a break from life. I just had our 4th child, and life was just mad, and we just wanted to slow things down a little bit. And so we went over there, and I got a job working with the Ministry of Health over there. So,
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I learnt an incredible amount. And I was actually the only nutritionist on the island, so they had me working sort of like a dietitian more than a nutritionist, which was challenging but amazing. And I guess the amount of diabetes and metabolic syndrome and obesity is just phenomenal there. So you're sort of looking at 80-90% obesity and a huge amount of diabetes. So I did a lot of research, and I came across Jason Fung and Diet Doctor, and that kind of just led me down that rabbit hole. And so but the results are amazing if you can, do it. And so that's just what I did for 4 years there, just worked with the people of Rarotonga.
What a fascinating story. So, firstly, did you slow down with the move? Because it sounds like it would have been pretty full on.
Yes and no. I mean, we slowed down in that we weren't sitting in rush hour traffic of Auckland, rushing around. But life with 4 kids and both working is busy wherever you are. But I still think it definitely gave us a breather for a moment while we had little children. So it was pretty good.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, how did you? I mean, did you implement what you were learning, or what you knew about carbs over there, or you kind of told to do it a certain way? Like, how did it look? I'm just fascinated.
Well, when I got the job, I said, what do you want me to, do you have any requirements for what I'm allowed to say? Because I know in a lot of other places they are, but they just said to me, just do what you think is going to help, and so I was actually in a really amazing position that my boss and the Ministry of Health were pretty open to anything. I think they're just at their wits' end, maybe, with what they're dealing with on a regular basis. And so, yeah,
Mm.
I was very lucky that I had hardly any pushback from the ministries over there. So that was pretty cool.
That's very cool. Our government could certainly do with a bit of that, stop kicking back as well for people that are trying to, reverse their metabolic health conditions. But I love to hear some stories. So, what were you able to achieve while you were there?
Um, well, I mean, I have lots of great stories, but I think my favourite one is a young guy. He was 40, so he's not young, but feels young to me now. um, he came to me and he was 162 kilos and had everything: diabetes, hypertension, fatty liver, and we just worked together. I mean, he had a lot of knowledge already, which really helped. So he was just needing, I think, sort of like a health coach to guide him. And so we dropped his carbohydrates right down, which would usually be the first thing I would do, was just focus on the carbohydrates. And then from there, we move into just seeing every 2 weeks if I can initially. And then we'd move into implementing some fasting and that kind of thing. And so he keeps in touch with me over here, so we've still followed up, regularly. And he's lost 60 kilos. He's got his, diabetes is gone. His blood pressure's, down, amazingly low. And
Amazing.
and the cool thing with that was he's quite a public uh, person within the Cook Islands, and so he worked in tourism. So he's been, really helping others as well. I think just from seeing what he's been able to achieve. Sorry, excuse me.
I could hear something. I'm like, is it a child or I love it.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. That's fine. It's all, no problem. I remember I was doing an interview once with Christine Pronow, who's a nutritionist here, and she had chooks jumping on the table and and dogs barking. I was like, life happens, right?
Yeah,
So
I
sorry, keep going. That's great.
know. Yeah, so he was just amazing, and he just took it all on and just ran with it. And patients like that are so exciting to work with, because you're just seeing such amazing health results. Probably my most favorite patient though was a 72-year-old man, and he was just this cute guy who'd had diabetes for 30 years, and he was getting kidney failure, and he was on insulin. And so I would always try and educate them on what diabetes was and what caused it. And quite often people would be quite angry that they didn't have an understanding of it.
Mm,
Having it for 30 years and not really ever being told. But
Mm.
he was amazing. He just made slow changes, and we managed to pretty much get him off insulin completely. And he was started to understand foods that would spike his blood sugars, and so it was cool to work with him because he was just like so thankful to have figured it out, so that he wasn't gonna, head down the path of being ravaged by his diabetes. He could manage it, and so he knew, because they eat a lot of their traditional diet does contain quite a lot of root crops, so starchy foods. But he knew the minute he ate some of that, he was going to need some insulin. So he was pretty good at staying away from it. But he was very cool.
Very cool. So what so you were there for 4 years. I mean, what did you see were the biggest barriers, I suppose, for people who, in terms of trying to make changes? Were there some common sort of threads that you saw in your time there?
Uh, you mean in terms of what they were eating and
Yeah, yeah. So what were
yes.
they coming up against?
Well, I think, like you'll know, everyone adopted the guidelines that we were told to take on. So, they moved away from their traditional diets, and they, like a normal day eating for someone would normally be wheat bix or bread for breakfast, or cereal like rices and cornflakes. Whereas traditionally it probably would have been some fish or some coconut, or and then lunch would be like 2-minute noodles, a couple of packets of those with some bread dipped in it. Yep. And then
Mm,
dinner would be rice, potato. A lot of carbohydrates, a lot of starchy carbs, and also, they always were cooking with canola oil or salad cooking oil. And so sort of all those things mixed together were just a very, very normal diet, and that they thought was healthy. They thought, well, I'm eating
mm.
brown bread, and I'm, you know, a lot of people would be like, oh, I've made changes to my diet. I've cut out red meat, and I'm, using margarine and
Yeah, which is so understandable because I mean, this is what people think here as well. And, it's the, I suppose the message that we get fed that if, you want to be healthy, lean meat, reduce it. And people with very, large amounts of knowledge are telling us this,
yeah,
yes, switch to margarine, all the stuff that you and I know are actually undermining people's attempts to be healthy. So I honestly think it's, people are really trying. They are trying really hard to do the best, but we're just getting fed the wrong rubbish, literally.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally agree. Everyone did what they were asked to do. They moved away from their coconut cream and avocados and
Mm.
that kind of thing, and they replaced it with canola oil and margarine and bread and grains. And you see photos from the Cook Islands in the 70s, and they're all lean and fit and healthy looking. And so, I mean, the 70s wasn't that long ago.
One generation, really. I mean, I was born in the 70s, in the early
Yeah,
70s. It's like, yeah, you watch anything of anywhere and really back of that in that time, and, everyone is lean. And it's like, it's so obvious, what's going on and what's happened. But it's tragic. And then of course it's for you know some cultures there's that they genetically have a predisposition, for insulin resistance, probably because they've been so insulin sensitive for what their entire time they've been on the planet. And for them, as soon their carb tolerance is even lower, but then we're kind of like, oh, but those people, they're just big boned,
yeah.
like it's just not right. It's why, the work you've done there is amazing. Did they must have hated it when you said you were coming back to New Zealand.
Uh, yeah, I was pretty sad too because
Mm,
I felt like I'd made a lot of traction, and especially in the last 2 years, people definitely were starting to change, not just from me. I think there's a lot of more understanding around it, and they do a lot of exercise. They love their fitness programs and things, and I was very sad to leave, and a lot of people were like, "Don't leave," but unfortunately, we felt like it was time for our family to come back to New Zealand. COVID didn't help because we were sort of trapped on a tropical island, so which is not that bad, but we couldn't see family, and our oldest was heading to high school this year, so we decided as a family. But I wish I could have stayed for myself to keep helping everyone over there. But yeah, there's some good people there. I hope that some of the knowledge is carrying on through. Yeah.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure you've impacted just so many people and people that you won't even know, the impacts you've had. It's phenomenal. I'd love to know from you what it's been like coming back to New Zealand, professionally, in terms of the work you do in New Zealand and what you're seeing in New Zealand now.
Well, I'm really just getting started back in New Zealand. So I just been seeing a couple of patients and just starting to sort myself out. So I can't really, it's really hard to know how that's going to go. But I'm going to be working for myself here as opposed to for an industry like the Cook Islands. And definitely noticing the pace of life is faster, and but I am loving the access to different types of foods, and it's a bit more affordable here to sort of eat the low carbohydrate way, and I am excited about it because there's obviously a lot of people here that can help, that I can help, and so it's definitely going to be interesting though.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems to me that, and maybe it's just because I'm in the space so much, but got quite a few people in New Zealand that I'm in regular contact with, and it seems very much, the underlying plant-based push is very strong over there, and it kind of just defies logic to me because New Zealand is just such lush, beautiful countryside, and I mean, the animals that people could be grazed there and eaten, and it just kind of defies. I know there's plenty of beautiful stuff over there, but there's a lot going on in terms of this plant-based push, and Melbourne and New Zealand are kind of at the forefront of it. So it'd be interesting to hear from you. I suppose it may be too soon for you being back there, but just if you've noticed anything like that, and is it more, is there any sort of thoughts you have around that, I guess?
I mean, I totally agree with you. The whole plant-based push just makes me a bit angry, actually, because you're right. How can New Zealand produces beautiful grass-fed animals that are here within our country? They are looked after well, and you can't beat the nutrition of some good quality meat. And then we're pushing to eat tofu that's got to be produced out of the country, has to go to a factory, it has to be packaged in plastic and then flow in here, and yet it's said to be better for us, and it doesn't make any sense. I mean, my grandparents have a farm, and so we get he kills a cow once a year, and we all get some of that, and I know
That's
that
awesome.
that animal is like well looked after. They get to roam the farm all day, and so there definitely is a massive plant-based push, and I don't think it's any different to the Cook Islands though, because I think they're quite similar in what they hear with New Zealand, because we're quite close, and so there is, you go into the supermarket and there's all the fake meats and you just like look at the ingredients on that stuff, and I just wouldn't want to put that in my body. So
No.
yeah, and I think I've been looking into the climate change, the push that says that cows are just so bad for the environment. And if you dig a bit deeper, you just come across the truth, like that they're not as bad as they're just, yeah, everyone thinks
I know.
that stopping eating red meat, that's going to cure the environment, but yeah,
No.
it's just
No. And
frustrating.
it is frustrating, and it's just a country like New Zealand has the potential to be so environmentally enhancing with all the, of course, cows they take carbon, beautiful regenerative agriculture, all that sort of stuff that actually heals the planet and ironically heals us. Interesting, isn't it? And then, I think it's very easy to, we have a belief and we kind of set out to kind of keep that belief in check. I mean, to think that if you eat a plant-based diet, you're not involved in any killing of animals, well, you're kidding yourself, because there's no life without death. And, the combine harvesters that actually harvest the land, the crops, kill way more animals than one cow, which feeds how many people does one cow feed for, a year? It's just,
Yeah.
it doesn't take much. I think, I've had so many people on the podcast, sort of share this stuff, and, all sort of agree, look, if you don't want to look at that, you won't. If you want to stay in your belief that, meat and, all that, but buying tofu is better for the environment, well, you are just kidding yourself. And I think it really doesn't take much, as you say, to scratch the surface and find the truth. And I love Dr. Peter Ballestead because he combines the environmental with the, our health, environmental health and our health. And it's so true. I mean, if we don't have a population that's metabolically well, nothing, that's the goal. We have to create, metabolic well people. And I think COVID's just been such a prime example of showing just how unhealthy a lot of the planet is when it comes to that. So it's just, I agree with you. I just know how people work in terms of their beliefs and their thought systems. And, if they want to keep believing that, that's fine. But there is just so many people, out there saying, actually, that's just not true. We're not making any money of it. But those people that are telling you to go and eat the pea protein or the plant-based alternative, they're making a hell of a lot of money off of that. And they don't really care about your health.
And the problem is it's impacting the lower socioeconomic people, because you think about the Pacific people who they can't afford to eat vegan. They can't afford the supplements that they would need to be healthy, so they cut out the meats and then they just replace it with the empty carbohydrates, the processed foods, and that's not a good message for them, because they're not going to be healthy. They are more prone to metabolic disease, and so then that's what we're seeing, that they are they're hugely prone to it, and it's really sad, actually,
It is sad.
and for the kids as well, we know that meat is good for their brains, for their ability to think properly, the nutrients it provides. And so hopefully the real message can get out there somehow.
Well, that's why I think we just, I say we can't rely on governments to change. They're so invested. They're so invested in the propaganda and what's going on now. I mean, we have to really take it on ourselves to educate ourselves and just know that, when we do share, we talk about it, we might not change someone's mind then, but we're planting seeds, constantly planting seeds. And, I'd love you to, from your, because of your background, I mean, you would be well aware and be able to share, what is the issue with vegan? Because just in terms of let's give, not the ideology, none of that, but let's look at it in terms of a nutritional perspective, because as you say, we're pushing this plant-based agenda onto people that can't afford to supplement. So why would we, I don't understand why it's optimal in so many people's minds, but what are we missing out on when we're not consuming any animal source foods?
Yeah, well, when we are eating vegan, for example, the protein source from a vegan diet is plant-based. So we don't absorb as much of the protein from, we're not able to utilize the protein as much. And that's a central nutrient that we need. And so often you're lacking in essential nutrients, essential amino acids that come from the proteins. B12 is a big one. So we can't get B12 from vitamin B12 from plants. We have to get it from animal products, and it's a really important vitamin that we need for our nervous system, for for a lot of things. And so you really have to supplement if you're vegan. And so if you can't afford supplements, then you're going to start noticing the effects of that. Iron from like red meat is much more absorbed than any of the iron you get within plants. Omega-3s, I mean, the list goes on. And we do know, and it's been scientifically proven, that you can't get what you need nutritionally from a vegan diet. You have to supplement. So it's not the optimal diet for us as humans. I mean, vegetarianism is a bit easier because you can have some dairy and you can have eggs, so you get some of the nutrition from those foods. But veganism is a very hard route. And I'm not anti-vegan if you are doing it because you don't want to eat animal. Like, that's fine, but you have to be aware of what you need to go with that, and not doing it because you think you're improving the climate or the earth, because it's not the best thing for us as humans. I had to laugh. My oldest son, he came home from school the other day, and he's learning about nutrition and digestion. And he's like, "Oh, Mum, the Inuit are the most unhealthy people in the world."
What?
And I know. And I was like, "Oh, who told you that?" And he's like, "Oh, my science teacher." And I was like, "Oh, they are not." But that's coming home from 13-year-olds coming home from school with that. And I was like, well, they're actually not. And I kind of explained to him, and I was like, but you're probably going to have to put in your exam, if she's told you that. But you could, talk to her about it.
That's so fascinating. And I've got, teenage kids as well that have gone through school and had very similar experiences. And, we always had the discussion, well, I just say to them, pick your battles, like, they really have to teach the guidelines. And this is the problem. This is why we have to get the guidelines changed, right? Because it infiltrates into education and hospitals and, everywhere that the government has a hand on. Even like my dad, my parents are just awesome. It took them a little while to come around, but they're, my mum at 75, has got all off her medication that she's been on since she was 30, completely healed. It's just, it is amazing. But they want to be really strong advocates for it. So every time they see something, they email it to me and like, Tracy, can you do something? Can you email these people? Or so my dad sent me this flyer this information that goes out to because he's very involved in aged care, about an aged care diet, and recommending what carers and what people should be eating. Of course, it's all crap. It's all, minimal protein. It's all dietary guidelines. And I just said to Dad, I said, well, this is the problem. Where governments are involved, it'll be guidelines. There is nothing anybody really can do about it. So the same with schools, that's why we have to educate ourselves, but the same with schools. And, my daughter decided to take it up with her teacher. One must have been when she was in year 9 or something. And the question was, here's a product. I don't know if it was a muffin or I don't know. How do we make it healthy? So, of course, she said, oh, we could add a bit of extra fat. We could take out the sugar and replace it with a bit of stevia or so, like we could go from the low fat to the full fat. Oh, no. Well, that's just making it, more unhealthy. How could you even think that? And she's like, well, because fat doesn't make you fat and it's carbohydrates. And I was so proud of her. But the teacher was just like, no, you're wrong.
Oh man, well hopefully she doesn't find out the hard way that
The teacher.
I know.
It's fascinating. I think there's so many angles that we have to kind of just, what can we do versus, what we can't do. I just think the one thing we can't do is ever stop sharing, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's, we're sharing with people that don't agree with us. I think, we're entitled to our opinions. And what you said before about, you're not anti-vegan. Well, I'm not anti-vegan either, but I am anti the truth not being told, and I'm anti-choice. I'm anti-people being told that this is, an agenda, that this is giving us something when it's not. So they're making decisions on poor evidence and no science. And, people can, if they've got the information, they make with it and do with it what they want. But the fact is we're just not given the right information in the first place, which is not fair.
Oh, exactly. And I think the most, I feel like I feel like I knew more when I left uni than I know now. Like I feel like I came out of uni like, yeah, I know it all. And then, 17 years later, I'm like, I have got so much to learn here. And I think the frustrating thing is that none of those guidelines were based on proper solid evidence. And that is the most frustrating thing. That you could just tell the world to eat a certain way, and we did it, and now we're like suffering massively for it, and it's very frustrating. And then trying to change people's minds that is wrong. I've actually got a really cool story. My grandma is 79, and she's her cholesterol is high, and so I've for the last 2 years it's been high, and she's amazing. I mean, my grandparents are like super healthy, really fit. And she comes to me, she's like, my cholesterol's high and they want to put me on this statin. But when I took it, I felt horrible. So we kind of worked, about what she could do with her cholesterol. But every time she goes for a blood test, they call her up and come in and see us. And so I've been sending her, all the studies that show that higher cholesterol in the elderly is protective, and, all the things that we need to look at, not looking at LDL, looking at HDL and triglycerides and things. And so she's so funny. She took her knowledge into the doctor and had a little chat with the doctor, and she was telling me about it, and she was giggling away. She was like, oh, the lady looked at me like I was crazy, and it was just funny. But she's awesome. She doesn't want to go on statins, and I think she's feeling quite comfortable with not, but every doctor she's seen is just like, we need to do something about your cholesterol. And but I just thought it's so awesome how my 79-year-old grandmother's, questioning the doctors. It's so funny.
Oh, good on her. And that's what we've got to do, like it's just crazy. Well, if you want me to go on that, show us where's your evidence? But not just, vested interest evidence, actual true evidence. My mum was the same. She was put on statins, but it was terrible, actually terrible for her, almost suicidal. And that was kind of around the time that I was learning about all this stuff as well. So I just, did the same thing. I sent her a whole lot of stuff. I said, look, Mum, I don't think you need to be on it. I looked at, we looked into everything else. I said, but she had to make that choice. And yeah, she got told, oh, I wash my hands of you. Her pharmacist was like, what are you doing? You're going to, basically going to kill yourself if you're not taking this stuff. I mean, it's it's one thing, you've really got to have a whole lot of guts and courage to go against, the medical advice if we see them as gods and knowing everything. But when you demystify it and understand exactly what you've said, that they go through uni, they don't learn about nutrition, they learn about pharmacology. So they're really just, that's what they know, right? They don't know anything else, most of them.
Yeah, and I think people are scared. Like if their doctor tells them to take something, it's scary to not do what you're told because we do put a lot of faith in them. So
Yeah, we do. But thankfully, there are, many doctors, certainly here, and I know in New Zealand as well, that
yeah,
from personal experience and because of, some sort of personal, illness, maybe themselves, or to someone in their family, they've come around and, very much promote this low carb lifestyle. And I think it,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
go Renee.
I was just going to say, and the doctors in Rarotonga were really amazing at, sending patients to me, but learning for themselves as well. And so by the end of the 4 years, they would be telling the diabetics that they needed to, cut down on their carbohydrates. And I sort of, before I left, I sent out a whole lot of information sheets for them to be able to print out and give out to patients if they wanted to. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Like there are some amazing doctors, and they're just busy. Sometimes they don't have the time to learn. So it's cool when they do either take the time or trust you to, provide that information for them. So,
But ultimately, I think too, we've just got to, if we're not happy with what we're told, find someone else. I think the younger generations do that really easily, but we kind of have this whole, oh, but what do they think of us? Oh, they might, like, I don't care. Just, you find someone that's going to support you on your journey, particularly if it's a journey that involves getting healthier, having a better quality of life. I mean, did you hear about Bert Newton?
no.
So do you know of Bert Newton? He's a very he's in his 70s, I think now. He's a pretty big entertainer in Australia, and
Okay.
he's been retired for a while. But the story came out a couple of days ago that he's had his foot amputated. I'm not sure if it's his whole leg or his foot, but basically from diabetes. But there's a whole, they're doing all the stories on it, but they're just not saying the right thing. They're, saying, oh, it just came from a cut in his toe. No, it came from type 2 diabetes and his body couldn't heal,
Yeah.
like just again, missing the point, focusing on his positive attitude, which is fine. I get it. Positive attitudes are great, but just completely missing the point of why it's happened in the first place and the fact that it's fully preventable.
Yeah, and it could be a good chance to, get a good time to get some info out there to anyone else that might be dealing with that.
Yep. You can't grow a leg back, right? I mean, once that's gone, that's gone. And, blindness, it just, I don't know. I question sometimes too, particularly type 2 diabetes. I think we think it's kind of because it is such a, it doesn't, you don't wake up in the morning and this has happened to you. This has been happening over many, many years, if not decades. So I think sometimes we think, oh, that's a long way off. That won't happen to us. But the minute you're faced with something like that, you would want to go back and change time, wouldn't you?
Definitely. Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's awful disease, especially in those last 10 to 20 years. If you've had it for a really long time, it can just be so horrible.
Well, we have to end on a positive note. So I'd love to get your wisdom and advice, for anyone listening on health and lifestyle. What are the biggest things that we can take away from, to give ourselves the best chance at optimal health, in your view, Renee?
Okay. Well, obviously, nutrition is a really big one. So I think eating as clean as possible in terms of, eating. I'm a big advocate for animal products and above ground vegetables and healthy fats. I'm also a big fan of fasting or time restricted eating, so trying to reduce the hours that you are eating your meals within. But then, of course, on top of that, plenty of sleep, plenty of time with friends and family. Looking after your mind as well as your nutrition is really important. I think that that's really important, to just sleep, good nutrition, exercise, and yeah, laughing
Yeah,
lots is always good.
I love it. I'm interested, just one last question with when you're over in the Cook Islands. I mean, I tend to think those people do family really well and community really well. Did you kind of get a sense of that and come away with new insights around that for yourself?
Yeah, I think that one thing I notice is they laugh a lot, which is cool.
Mhm.
Like, I think they do they like to have fun and joke and laugh, and they've got a really strong community. A lot of them, it's within the churches that they go to. So that's really cool. And they do rally around each other a lot. If someone is needing some help, or needs some food, and that, so with COVID last year, there was people offering up free vegetables, or come and pick your own taro or whatever. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool. They do really look out for each other. And but yeah, I think my favorite thing is they love their culture. They love that their face lights up when they are doing their dancing, and yeah, so
I love it. I love it. It's so important, isn't it? To have that element as well. And I think it's, when you talk about the hustle and bustle of city life, it's very easy to lose sight of that sometimes. But we can make it happen still, no matter where we're living. So I love it. I love it.
yeah.
Well, it's been such a pleasure, Renee. Well, how awesome. I am so grateful to you for coming on here and sharing your experiences and your stories. It's just, I love it. I love hearing it. I love sharing it. So thank you so much for your time. And, good luck setting everything back up over in New Zealand, and stay in
Thank you.
touch. And hopefully this movement will just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And yeah, you run off your feet.
Thanks for having me. It's been a really nice chat.
Thanks, Renee.